Compliance, where the genie really is malicious. Our first post is by Kath Joy. Manager forces me to get a doctor's note despite it being illegal to do so. Doctor writes him the most passive-aggressive note, signing me off for 2 weeks instead of 2 days to teach him a lesson. I posted this, but it got removed, and I think it was maybe because I didn't make the malicious compliance clear enough. So I'm going to try again and make it extra clear. When I was in my early 20s, I worked at a supermarket. I should note that I was a pretty reliable employee. I was never late. In fact, I often got in early, and I rarely called in sick. At the time this happened, I had not called in sick for 9 months, and even then the manager had sent me home. I've been up all night, swinging between burning hot and freezing cold, so I was obviously feverish, and I'd been throwing up at both ends, shall we say. At one point, at about 2 a.m., I was on the toilet with my head in the sink, utterly miserable. I must have passed out, because the next thing I knew, I was lifting my head off the sink and it was 7 a.m. I was due to start work at 12 that day, but that obviously wasn't going to happen. I called up the manager. Let's call the manager Steve. Steve was known for being a real a-hole. He never believed anyone who called in sick except his best buds, usually the other manager, never lowly staff. Often called in sick himself. A lot of time we knew it was because he was hungover and not actually sick. The conversation went as follows. Hey Steve, I can't come in. I'm sick.
With what?
I don't know. I think it might be the flu. I've been up all night sick and have a fever. Don't be stupid.
If you had the flu, you'd be completely knocked out.
What type of flus have they been talking? I need you in. Come in or you're fired. I can't. I just told you. I can't stop vomiting. I passed out.
Either come in or bring a doctor's note, or you're fired.
In the UK, you're legally allowed to self-certify for 5 days. This means you can tell your employer you are sick and you do not need a doctor's note. If you are sick for more than 5 days, you need a note. It's also illegal to demand a doctor's note during the self-certify period. I knew this, but I was terrified. This was during the recession. I couldn't afford to lose my job, so I got dressed, almost passed out trying to do so, then trudged to the doctor's, some 25-minute walk away. I ended up sitting in the doctor's office for a little over an hour, which for walk-in is pretty good. I went in to see the doctor, and she was furious at me for coming in. You're not supposed to come to the doctors when you are ill, and of course I knew I should be able to self-certify. She told me as such, saying I shouldn't be here and should have stayed at home. I then explained what happened with Steve and how he had threatened to fire me over this, and I couldn't afford to lose my job. I was struggling as it is. My doctor turned her anger towards my manager. She asked if I got sick pay from the company, and I said yes.
He wants a sick note, does he?
The doctor says.
Okay, I'll give him a sick note.
Now, my manager just wanted a note confirming I was sick, but instead my doctor wrote something along the lines of,
OP has come to the surgery because the manager has insisted she come in. In spite of the fact that this is illegal and all employees are allowed to self-certify, due to being forced to make this unnecessary and highly dangerous trip when the patient is ill, has a fever of 39 degrees Celsius and almost passed out in the waiting room. I am signing OP off for 2 full weeks to recover. Had OP had been allowed to self-certify, as is the law, they might only need a few days, but due to straining themselves, they now require 2 full weeks. They are not permitted to work until 2 weeks later.
The doctor said she would have signed me off longer, but this was the longest she could do without requiring further evidence. So basically, instead of being off for a few days, I was now signing off for a full 2 weeks, and I'd be paid for it. I went to my place of work, at which point one of the duty managers saw me and asked me what the heck I was doing there. Go home. I was obviously very unwell. I explained what happened, and they agreed to help me downstairs to Steve's office and went with me inside. I handed Steve the note. He looked worried and tried to say,
I wasn't being serious about firing you.
Well, gee, when you angrily growled it down the phone, it sure sounded like it. The duty manager then declared that they were going to drive me home. It was clear Steve wanted to argue, but had the sense to know he shouldn't. The duty manager then drove me home, made sure I was okay, then went back to work, where they informed me, our union rep, of what happened. Steve had a disciplinary hearing where he was given a severe reprimand and a warning. Steve tried to argue he never said I'd be fired and I was lying and just decided to go to the doctors, but the duty manager said they heard him admit to it when he said he didn't really mean it. I felt better after a few days, and enjoyed my 2 weeks off, fully paid and enjoyed the nice weather we had. Meanwhile, Steve was forced to work overtime because we were short-staffed. So thanks to the doctor, instead of being off for a few days, I ended up getting a nice 2-week paid vacation, and Steve was given a final warning, all because he insisted I get a doctor's note. Too long, didn't read. Manager demands I get a doctor's note or I'm fired, so the doctor signed me off for 2 weeks instead of 2 days to teach him a lesson. I don't know about this law in the UK, but seriously, why would you break the law? That's just stupid. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you get sued for that, because if that's a way to get sued, that's a good way to get sued. Seriously, what is wrong with this guy? He's probably on like some power trip or something. It's not about you taking the sick days, it's about you not listening to him. So, I guess he gets justice for being a douchebag. Our next post is by U/Q2005. Q2005. Staff buying anything to eat must get receipts signed and taped to the product. I was the assistant manager in a discount retailer. Every few days, someone in corporate will come up with an idea designed to look good in paper in an office somewhere. I'm sure, maybe a beautiful PowerPoint display or an Excel sheet loaded with formulas. All fantastic in theory, but painful to implement in real life. On this day, an email came, basically that from here forward, anything purchased by staff that is going to be in the staff area would have to have a manager sign till receipt attached. There will be a 2 days grace, and anything found on the next area manager call would be noted and binned immediately. So regardless if this was a sandwich and a drink for lunch, a jar of coffee, or a full shop, it would be binned. Cameras everywhere except the toilet cubicles wasn't enough. Let's say these guys on a pittance know we trust them less than a Chris Chan on old folks' home. I didn't know what Chris Chan was this morning. I wish I didn't know now. I don't want to know either. The company, unable to hold managers, were on a huge recruitment drive rather than promoting from within. Decided to promote from outside to fill the positions faster. So my store gets a new store manager with limited previous experience and out to make his name in the company. Immediately, he hits the canteen, bin everything with no receipts, everything, food and non-food. He doesn't give a dang. The staff are pissed. Words travel fast. Now, I paid my dues between on-trade and retail. I started on the bottom, sorting bottles for recycling as a kid, and I know enough to know that I and my colleagues are only numbers in the corporate machine. Disposable, replaceable, and a necessary inconvenience that is to be treated as such and never to be treated as equal to the customer, even when they are the customer. Corporate never considered for the moment how much the staff spent. 45 to 50 people throughout the week supplementing the sales. Understanding that when someone is on a timed break, remembering the receipt is not a priority, and then trying to find a manager to sign it. I know, I'd often be in the cash office counting tills, and the company policy didn't let you leave that room in the middle of a count with a safe open. So by the time your signature was obtained, a fair chunk of your 15 to 30-minute break was gone at your own expense. And this applied to me as well. I was expected to get whoever was on me with me to sign my receipts. I had a very quick meeting with everyone. I'd see over the next few days explain this new piece of stupidity and why there's coffee, sugar, etc. has vanished and that is entirely the new guy. I also pointed out very clearly that anything purchased in the major retailer directly opposite was outside the scope of our new employer and could not be touched, and needed no receipts or proof of any kind. And if it was touched, I would report it directly to the highest available person I could get, bypassing the area management. It took 3 weeks before the call came, and in that time we stuck to the rules in the letter. The store was down on its week-on-week figure against the last year for the last couple of weeks by a few hundred. Guess why? Area manager arrives to investigate how the new store manager is letting the figures slip. pulls me aside and asks what the flip is happening with the drop-off. I explain what happened, how all the staff, food and stuff is tossed out with no concern, and how, with this situation, the only option was to shop elsewhere. He looked at me shocked, like, how could this idiot do this? He goes off on his phone, comes back, calls me and new guy to the office, says unofficially reverts back to normal. This is the only blip in my area, get these figures right for next week. But it was too late to fix it next week, but within 2 weeks we were okay and the new guy was seen as the savior and got a move to a brand new store and lasted a month before his team turned on him. The end. Is this maliciously compliant enough? I don't even know. Okay, bro. I mean, that was just stupid. I mean, seriously, you're just literally, you're just losing sales because of some stupid rule. Seriously, it's not even like a necessary rule anyway. It's not even necessary. You already have security. You already have security stuff to implement this stuff. This is stupid. I mean, stupid is stupid, right? You can't help stupid. Next post is by Recommendation No 191. The man we call Subsection 6. This happened long time ago, somewhere around 2012-2013. Had a good friend who I smoked cigars with, and he had a friend named Jim. I didn't see Jim very often because we lived in different cities, but every time I visited, we would smoke cigars in the park. Well, near the park. Jim was probably about the smartest guy I have ever met, and if I met Einstein, it might be eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Well, almost. We call him Subsection 6 because he was always finding a loophole for absolutely everything. He's the kind of guy that would read all the tax laws and interpretation bulletins and mold his life to that. He was one of the first people that was working from home. He had his printer in a different room than where he had his office in so he can claim more square footage as the home office. He was that kind of guy, and he wasn't an accountant or anything. He was an IT guy. He just reads lots. Don't mess with the IT guy. One day, the three of us went down to the beach to smoke cigars. In parks, you're not allowed to smoke, but we grabbed our chairs and went anyways. The tide was low, so we went down to just past the rocks where the sand started and smoked away. This is where I heard the story. So I remember Einstein told a story about if he had 1 hour to solve a problem to save his life, he would think of a proper question for 58 minutes. Well, Jim is one of those guys that asks questions that we don't think about. He looked around the park because he was busted one time, and he asked himself this question. I can see the property line where the road is. I can see the property line where there's a house next door, and he can see the property line where there was a hotel next. But where's the property line when you're looking out at the ocean? He did his homework, and he found out that while the city owned the foreshore, it was the DFO that owns the ocean from the high tide line down. That is crown land, and they don't have a prohibition. Okay, you know what? They don't have a rule forbidding smoking on the beach. This is where we had our chairs a day. He told me the story. So he lives in a retirement city with lots of old ladies who have their morning walks the same time he has his morning cigars. That's how he was busted in the first day, but he was ready after he did his research. He used a printer that was in the other room, and he printed out the laws. He also made a phone call to one of his cigar buddies who was a lawyer who knew a lawyer that did property stuff. I'm not talking about real estate transactions when you buy a house. I'm talking about property rights, air rights, things like that. A lot higher up in the food chain. Up floor, corner, office kind of guy. So depending on the cigar, you're looking at 45 minutes to smoke a Robusto to an hour and a half for a Churchill or anything bigger than that. Soon thereafter, the Karens came by complaining about him smoking in the park, even though he was in the ocean. This was years before anyone was called Karen. So the Karens started bugging him and threatened to call the police or bylaws when he told them to go ahead. He just started his cigar so he had plenty of time. He sent a message to his lawyer, a friend of a friend, to give him a heads up. He might be calling later. No problem. Well, the Karens didn't just called bylaw, they called the police. So Jim continued smoking a cigar when he handed over the printout regarding foreshore ownership. It's not the fault of the police because they're used to speeding and stuff like that, but they didn't know this law. bylaws come by and pretty much the same thing, so he gets on his phone and shows them the lawyer's website and makes the call. Meanwhile, the cops and bylaws are phoning their supervisors about this as well. Of course, the Karens aren't happy, so they start complaining about the secondhand smoke, but they don't have any legal basis. Jim talks to the property rights lawyer on speakerphone, and he says for the police and bylaws supervisors to give him a shout and he will enlighten them about where the park property began and end. Of course, this is the best part of the story. We were smoking a 10-year-old Punch Churchill when he told me the story. So the epilogue is that whenever he's smoking at low tide and bylaw comes, not just for him, but for dogs and drinking and other stuff like that, they always shake their heads and wave. They told him that they've had complaints about him smoking in the park, and they now ask where is the guy, in the park or down the sand, because the sand isn't the park, it's the ocean. So I just wanted to do a quick edit for a bunch of reasons. As far as the printer and taxes go, I don't know the whole story. What I do know is that he was subsection 6, and not only did he discover a law that said below high tide was not the park, he also read a lot about the interpretation bulletins from the tax authorities. He wouldn't commit any tax fraud, he would just use the rules to the full extent. Unfortunately, I can't confirm what happened. I do know at this point he hasn't been audited. I'm a semi-newbie and I got some anonymous awards and it keeps telling me chat is not available, so I can't thank those people. I keep trying. Sometimes in your life you meet someone and you just go, wow, Jim is that guy. There's a lot of things he didn't have in his life, i.e. wife and kids, but he lived his life like a how-to textbook. Everything was well thought out and structured. He was gregarious and kind and giving, that's all I'm gonna say. Second edit. So it appears that there are two flashpoints in my story, and I'd like to address both of those. As far as taxes go, I mentioned it before, not only did Jim read the interpretation bulletins, but knowing his thoroughness, he would have confirmed this. I don't know the whole story, but I do know we call him subsection 6 for a reason. I know I just mentioned it above on my first edit, but there's still Americans saying that this is tax fraud, and I'm sorry, but I am not American, even though I live in North America. People around the world have different tax laws than you. As far as secondhand smoke, anyone who lives on the ocean can tell you low tide can be a large area. We didn't get a GPS to figure out where the high tide line was and smoked right on the edge, thumbing our noses to the people walking by on the path. We were far away from people because whether you're legally correct or not, there's always going to be people yapping, and why wreck a nice peaceful cigar by having people bother you? Now, I'm on the inland take, and I'm standing in water, just above a full bowl. That's a lot closer to the park. I've never actually done this on the lake because you have physical proximity. I don't like the smell of cigarettes, but if someone walks by my house smoking a cigarette and I'm in the front yard, I have no legal recourse. That's just the way it is. Would that person walking on the road smoking a cigarette be a dick? Not specifically. I'll just move away, even though it's my property. So one more little fact before I close edit number 2. Jim lives in an apartment condo, and smoking on his balcony, although illegal, did cause complaints. In winter time, he smoked in his truck. Yes, Frisbees worked. I tried it myself. And in the summer, went to the park. In each situation, he was further away from people, and if it was smoking on his balcony in the summertime. Wow, this guy is, pissing off a Karen and not breaking the law. Well, can't ask for a better story. I know I talked about smoking here, but please don't think I'm encouraging smoking, because I'm really not. But good story. Good story, OP. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching, and peace out.